Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Get in the Herd After Hours. After Hours. This is a recovery podcast brought to you by the McShin Foundation. My name is Alex Bond. I'm the host of the podcast, as well as a certified peer recovery specialist and a staff member here at McShin, reporting live from my office. I'm the medication and drug screening coordinator here, and more importantly, a person in sustained recovery from a substance use disorder, which means that I've not put any mood or mind altering substances in my body for about 15 months now. And I'm really stoked about tonight's show. We got a real cool group of people here. First off, Joe, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hey, thanks, Alex. Happy to be here tonight. My name is Joe Conniff. I'm a person in long-term recovery. What that means to me is I haven't found it necessary to take the full flight from reality through substances since May 15th, 2015. I currently work as a certified peer counselor and resource specialist with a local drug diversion court here in Seattle. Also a mindfulness instructor, post 9/11 Navy vet, and recently authored my memoir, Causes and Conditions, a life experience in addiction and recovery, that just came out in mid-December of 2020. Thanks.
That's awesome. That's really awesome. Very happy to have you on. T, why don't you introduce yourself?
Good evening, everyone. My name is T. Scott. I am a certified peer recovery specialist and CEO and founder of the Maryland Peer Advisory Council, formerly known as IMPACT. We provide leadership and advocacy and training for individuals, families, and allies in seeking recovery. I am also a Maryland organizer for the Recovery Advocacy Project. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. Very happy to have you on. We've had a lot of rap people on here, so we love the Recovery Advocacy Project for sure. Seth, why don't you introduce yourself, my friend?
Absolutely. My name is Seth Welch. I am also honored to be here tonight too. Thank you all for inviting me, and thanks, Joe. I'm a person in long-term recovery as well, which for me that means that if I make it to Valentine's Day, it'll be 12 years. So that's pretty great. I work as a substance use disorder professional and basically the recovery program manager at Seattle's only public recovery high school. So I've been with that for over 5 years, basically since it began here. Interagency Recovery High School is the name of it. And I've worked in treatment always with teenagers and young adults for about 10 years. And I love my whole life is recovery, and I like it that way. It's very much professional, is very much integrated with personal, and that works for me. So
that's awesome. Very, very happy to have you on, and hopefully Valentine's Day pans out for you. That's a cool little recovery date for sure. So I'm just going to jump right in and I guess ask, like, Joe, can you actually explain what a drug court diversion program is to listeners who might not know what that is?
Sure. So I'll do my best to kind of describe a program that I'm familiar with. I know they can vary state to state, county to county. Need to just definitely clarify that I don't speak for King County or King County Drug Diversion Court.
Sure.
We can talk about what I do know is the program that I work in is a pre-trial, pre-adjudication felony diversion program, which means folks that are going to participate in the program are charged with a felony or multiple felonies. And it's typically a 12 to 18 month program, variety of services. Trying to think of the best way to describe kind of the journey a little bit is, kind of what the program itself. So right now, the program I'm working in has more of a representation of crimes fueled by substance use. So in most cases, about 2/3 of the participants in the program are charged with a property crime like residential burglary, vehicle prowl, things of that nature. There's a little bit of possession charges, a little bit of delivery or selling. But during the process of participating in that program, which is a behavior modification program, folks are connected to medication, everything from Suboxone, Methadone, Vivitrol. We started off by issuing folks Narcan, Naloxone. We have a housing program attached to that where folks can get some rent-free housing for 12 months, recovery supportive. Folks participate in intensive outpatient services, mental health counseling, one-on-ones with counselors from both SUD or mental health. Progressing through the program requires abstinence and can be supported by medication. But once folks complete the drug diversion court program, their felonies are dismissed. And so that's the experience I had with it, was starting on the other side of the program, got 2 of my felony charges dismissed, and back on the other side of that program now, giving back to folks that I feel like I understand, and I see a lot of people from the streets of my community in there day in and day out. Then
cool. I think that really, you really have kind of like a leg up. I can't say I have ever heard of someone who went through drug court and then ended up working for them. So that's got to be like a major advantage. Most often, I'll be honest, like I know other participants who have done it. I know the success rate is usually pretty low, at least here in Virginia. I'm only going to talk about, what I know at least is that the success rate is pretty low. And it's usually like counselors and people who, or maybe like social workers and people who might not understand the disease as much as someone who has it. And I'll be honest, I've probably talked shit about it on this podcast at some point, but that's because of, my knowledge and research of it with Virginia's. How much of an advantage is it having a substance use disorder while helping people with a substance use disorder? I mean, I think all of us do that, but we don't always see it in like a drug court governmental setting.
That's a great question. I think, right now is, not to, have it sound selfish, self-centered, but I feel like, there's a level of effectiveness that there's a lot of folks supporting the drug court mission in the community that, as well as in the court, it's a multidisciplinary team. And I think it's one thing to, seemingly have people constantly telling you how to recover. But when you have a peer, somebody who's been through the process, peer counselors and recovery coaches, which we're starting to integrate more, partnering with an outside agency that is actually training other alumni to be recovery coaches. You get somebody that can show them how and can definitely level the playing field. And so one of the things we've identified is new participants to the program should probably hear from me and other graduates before they hear from anybody else on the first morning. And that's kind of how it's set up, is we want to show you the resources and the people that are here to support you before we introduce the obligations and those things. And fortunately, a lot of the team that are there are people that I felt supported by. And I didn't have the peer perspective when I was there, but I feel like it has definitely strengthened our program. And to be honest, we weren't really at the forefront of introducing peers into the model, but we're getting up to speed real quick. And I think we're seeing the benefits of that. And I think the folks in our program are as well.
No, that's really cool. I commend you for that. T, just out of curiosity, have you or Seth ever been to drug court?
Not personally been to drug court. However, I did serve for a period of time in a family dependency court, which it mirrors it, but it's not the same. It was a voluntary family dependency court in which family members had their children removed from the home for substance use and or neglect. And then you would have to go through DSS along with the same type of team that you discussed, Joe, in order to be reunified with your child. So it was a different concept. It was less punitive. It didn't involve charges. However, no, it was definitely moving to see families collectively work together to be reunified with their children.
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure. And I was looking at your resume a little bit, and you're definitely overqualified to be on here. Like, I don't know. I just was reading it, and it seems that you really put a lot of work in a very diverse thing, different areas and stuff like that. So 30 years in kind of like public service. What have you found in that 30 years is kind of the biggest thing that we as a public need as a service?
Well, first, I'll say I don't believe that I'm overqualified. I think we all bring something to the table, you know. And the answer to your question would be, I think we need more community education, in reference to substance use, harm reduction, addiction, and recovery. And I also believe that we need to bridge the gap between prevention and recovery. They are two different separate models, and we don't bring them together. So, if anything, I would say community education is key. And definitely when you're working with family members, and to include faith-based, any community member that touches a human being should be educated around substance use and the process to recovery.
That's beautiful. And that actually leads to our friend Seth here, who has been helping educate the community about substance use disorder. Correct, my friend, with this recovery high school that you're helping run?
Yeah. I mean, I first just want to say, well, I really loved what that is a great segue. And I love what T just said about the integration of substance use disorder, treatment and recovery and prevention, which is, and the way she just said that just made so much sense. And we have seen that, right? So I work at this recovery high school, and it's very small, right? It is abstinence based, meaning that the abstinence is the goal. But certainly we also see, what many of us in recovery have seen or experienced, and we see relapse surely with some of our students. But I think that what's interesting about that point and that sort of the middle ground is that we have students that are what most people would consider very progressed in the if they refer to the disease model, or just in terms of what drugs they've done even by the age of 15, right, or younger. And then we have students that recently we've seen more of a influx of kids that are coming directly out of junior high school, and either a guardian or a mentor or a coach or something like that has said, this isn't really looking like this kid might be the best fit for a traditional comprehensive high school, and they have some reasons for that, and so we've seen kids come, and we're not necessarily we've changed, right? We've adapted to our model to be a little bit more all inclusive of like, hey, look, if you want to be committed to sobriety, we're not going to be judging you on how bad of a problem you did or didn't have. We're more interested in your participation in this community, but we do need that buy-in. No matter if you think you have a substance use disorder or not, what we are doing here is these students are staying sober largely on community, which I think the McShin Foundation is all about. So yeah, I'd be happy to talk extensively about that. But I've never seen, having worked in treatment for many years, I've never seen young people get a hold of recovery in a very real and meaningful way, and not just with, certainly we have a kid who's 17 years old who's going to be celebrating 3 years of uninterrupted sobriety literally next week, but that's not even the norm. You know what I mean? Like, the norm is that kids get several months, and even in 90 days or 6 months, they really increase their functioning in society and really start becoming contributors rather than whatever hardships they were experiencing before.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. I really commend you for it, for sure. Joe, did you and Seth know each other prior to now?
Yeah. Actually, Seth was one of the first people I met within my first 24 hours after being released from jail. Part of my drug court track was kind of being separated from the community because I had a very difficult time stopping using. And so I did about 110 days in an in-custody treatment program that was kind of like outpatient in a in-custody facility. But the morning after, he was one of the first people I met in the local recovery community. And so definitely debt of gratitude to Seth for much of my recovery process over these years and understanding the value of community. Somebody that stepped out on a limb to extend, hope and fellowship to me when it was probably the first most difficult week of my life, is figuring out how do I stay abstinent in the community and commit to this process. And so yeah, this has been a wonderful journey, watching what the work he's doing, and being able to call him a friend during this process as well.
That's super cool, man. I remember like when I went to Roanoke, that's where I'm from, Roanoke, Virginia. I went back home at like day 15 or 20 or something like that. And I was talking to a guy at this conference, and I was kind of like ashamed that I was like only 15 or 20 days clean. And he told me, he was like, you got more courage than anyone else in this room right now. And it was like this huge banquet or whatever. So, that first 30 days is like super commendable to anyone going through that right now. And so anyone listening, just keep at it for sure. I think that's really, heartwarming to hear, Joe. So T, you're in with the Maryland Recovery Advocacy, the organizer for Maryland Recovery Advocacy Project. What has Maryland kind of been working on right now, or looking at right now as like a top priority?
From a local level, it would be just kind of engaging and bridging the digital divide. From a statewide level, and there's some huge advocacy efforts going on in reference to harm reduction, building stakeholders, organizing our communities, talking to local officials, and trying to really engage people and really meet them where they are. We have to be honest about what's happening in our communities and engage our young people. So we're kind of building a recovery ready community, if you're familiar with that. The same thing that young people in recovery has its wheel, and kind of moving around this wheel to effectively engage and support the community. So we did a few listening sessions when COVID first hit. And Recovery Action Project is just like huge about working on real solutions, right? And not focusing on a problem, but really kind of just homing in on the solutions, right? And we can't do that without listening to our community members. So, and then engaging and creating a plan, and then forwarding and implementing the plan, and then reevaluating it. And I know that's a lot to say in a nutshell, but that's really what we have to do. So just really being busy about what's happening, talking to our community members, engaging our young people, organizing our stakeholders, meeting our constituents, talking about how we can support each other, definitely during this pandemic, because it has just changed the whole focus of everything. How we engage and provide peer support, how we work with the individuals who need or are actively using drugs right now, those who are currently in recovery, and we're trying to support them to remain in recovery. And it's just been a challenge, and I'm sure this is across the board for everyone here. But that's the benefit about being a part of the Recovery Action Project, because you can meet people, you can network, you can learn from each other, right? And it's a collective room of people coming together to support the recovery movement. So it's been an amazing ride being a part of the Recovery Action Project, and I look forward to the upcoming year.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so like Seth and Joe, I can imagine as T was talking, kind of like acclimating to a more digital, recovery platform. Has that been difficult at the high school, Seth, or are y'all kind of just like business as usual?
Well, it's business as usual in terms of the kids teaching me more than I teach them. That is no change there, but that it was an adjustment, and I'm blessed. I feel really fortunate to be able to say, even just to be in recovery and have a job, that could go remote, because that wasn't my experience up until, being in long-term recovery. It was a long journey for me. I didn't even have a driver's license for the first 6 years I was sober. So that gives you an idea, just a little bit. But I've been amazed at the kids, how well they've adjusted. And I was really concerned, just because we've put all this, I don't even know how many times they heard me personally say, like, let's put the phone down, and that's not really real connection. And we're trying, the opposite of addiction is connection. We're trying to tap in. And then you're like, so about that, and that's a little, they throw that back on me and stuff, and I think probably one of the harder things is like you're trying to be respectful of young people and give them autonomy, and so we sort of have, you're not even really supposed to tell kids to turn on their camera, really, which I probably violate that a little bit, by just really encouraging, it really makes a difference right here. Even just us right here, right now, I feel like I know T, right? And I clearly know Joe and Alex. I've watched you in a couple other podcasts, right? It creates a different sense of community, but
Sure.
We've also gotten creative about when we've been able to create some social distancing types of activities and stuff like that in and around Seattle. And we've gotten a lot of support from, first place I would mention is actually where Joe and I met, which is I don't know if you can see my shirt, but this is 23rd and Cherry Fellowship Hall, which if you ever go to a meeting in Seattle, that's where you want to go. They've sponsored a lot of activities for our kids, right? This is one of the local recovery halls, and predominantly serving the African American community in Seattle since the early 80s. And then the one thing I did want to mention as well that was recently erected, and I know that the founders of the McShin, John and Carol, I believe, have been hugely involved in the collegiate recovery communities and the recovery high schools throughout the country. And so one of the things that supports recovery schools, because it's one thing to provide a school, during the school day. Okay, that's great. We got you sober from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. Well, what about the other 12 hours that the kids are up after? They stay up pretty late. They stay up quite late. Yeah, so
I don't think they sleep.
I don't think they
sleep at all.
Right. Exactly.
Speaking of young people, we actually did a panel yesterday, and we have our very first recovery high school in Frederick, Maryland, which is Phoenix Recovery Academy, and with Sean Nicholson and some other great people doing some awesome work and really changing lives for young people. It really gave me the vision to want to bring a recovery high school in Baltimore City and really drive to work and have real conversations with young people. I think that we talk to kids and we don't listen to kids, so I am really looking forward to bringing that to light. I'm sure that takes a lot of planning, and I'm learning a lot from Phoenix, and they have been awesome just supporting us. First you just have to have a vision, right? But just walking into Phoenix, I don't even know if it's such thing, but you can feel recovery. Right. It was clean. It was safe. It was airy. Food being brought to the kids every day. I mean, it was one of the most amazing experiences, to the point where I went back a second time. So I thank them for allowing us to do that. And it's just a great movement that they're doing there in Frederick, Maryland.
Mm-hmm. We definitely had Sean and I think a couple of the other people associated with it on, and I didn't understand until talking with them just how daunting of a task it is to get one of these up and running. I mean, the bureaucracy and the red tape and the obstacles and just the sheer magnitude of it all is really, I was taken aback at it when we were talking to them, but it's such a huge reward to have one. And I think having one in Baltimore would be awesome. And, I think that's a great idea in general. So just to switch gears a little bit, Joe, you mentioned that you were a veteran. Is that correct?
Correct.
As a veteran, do you think that other veterans are missing certain services, or maybe at a disadvantage if there's a certain, I don't know, any input there?
Speaking for locally, I feel like there's a wealth of energy and focus here in Seattle and King County. I mean, my support as a veteran actually started behind bars. I was somebody who was discharged for my drug use, and so I had pretty much given up on the idea that I was even eligible for anything. And they came and found me, King County Correctional Facility. And I was actually surprised. There was a very renewed push by some local county council members and some people in our local behavioral health and recovery division at the county level that were like, hey, we're missing this population. And, how do we identify where they are? What are the questions we're asking that aren't letting us know where these vets are? And so a lot of it had to do with discharges related to substance use, which is something in my experience, which felt like I didn't classify as a veteran. And so I think, at least in our community, in our region here in Washington, around Seattle, it's been heavily focused on like asking those right questions, letting vets know that like maybe at the federal level, you're not getting certain supports, but here in Seattle and King County, like you are eligible for things, and then it's other things that are breaking down on a larger scale that even with my discharge of other than honorable, I'm still eligible for behavioral health services at the VA here in the Beacon Hill section of Seattle, which, to me, had that been available when I was in drug court, would it have changed, my treatment and my outcome? I don't know, but having that option available to be in treatment and recovery or behavioral health settings with other veterans, maybe for that camaraderie, those other things, that might have been just even more beneficial to me. But that's something that's progressed over the last few years. And so just kind of seeing that, again, I can only speak for here, but I feel like we're doing pretty well in the Seattle and King County area. I don't know, Seth, if you have any other thoughts on that as well. But
yes, I'm a sober veteran as well. I'm proud of that.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I mean, definitely what Joe was just saying, but I have to be really honest too. One of the things was that my military career was also abruptly, they sort of like respectfully encouraged me to just go on out of the military, like you're not eligible for reenlistment, my drinking had gotten pretty serious. But one of the things that I have to say is that I actually encountered, like, this was actually, it was kind of dark, I guess, but one of my cellmates, that led up to me getting sober behind DUIs and stuff like that. I swear, I mean, this guy was like my counterpart. He, it seemed like he had almost had the exact same story as me. We had the same rank. We enlisted around the same time. We both deployed, all this stuff. And except there was one key difference, and he was African American, I was white. And I tell you what, the other difference was that I was getting an honorable discharge and he was not. And that just came up for me right when Joe was talking like that. I was just thinking about, and he went on to, I'm pretty sure he went on to prison, and we had the same charges, right? And so just looking at my whole journey would have been completely different, if I wasn't able to access those VA benefits. I mean, that's something we could really look at more closely, is that if, veterans that are disproportionately affected by substance use could be looked at as like, look, if you're willing to receive some help, you could hold on to your benefits. What greater thing could you provide to people that have served your country?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know that that's happening enough. I've surely benefited from many of the VA benefits. So
mm-hmm. Yeah, the VA is definitely the best way that veterans can get involved and get the services that they need. But I think often, like, veterans and Black people are the disenfranchised that kind of get forgotten about a lot of times. T, is that kind of the case? And when we talk about Baltimore, and I mean, that's kind of like one of those cities that pops in people's head about the disenfranchised and the forgotten. Can you maybe elaborate on kind of the same question, but from a different angle?
So sure. So, everyone's using the term BIPOC. So Black, Indigenous, people of color are always at it's always a issue with that around being supported in the proper way, right? Just
Okay.
bottom line. It's the easiest way I can say it. Is a huge amount of systemic racism. We're working with diversity, equity, and inclusion, and trying to make sure people who need the supports get it. And I believe we need to raise our voices a lot higher, and bridge that gap in talking to people and support people that really need the services. Communities are hurting in Baltimore City. Just some stats. In 2019, we had 910 individuals just in Baltimore City alone died from unintentional drug and alcohol related overdoses, and this year, just from, January to September, we had 2,025 people who lost their lives. And a lot of that, in a lot of the areas, Baltimore was the highest rating outside of, I believe it was PG County, who had a high amount of unfortunate related overdoses. So it's just been our thing to really try to work and try to bridge in those gaps for communities and individuals of color, to support them in the best possible way.
Mm-hmm.
I think the solution to that is, looking at it more so not from an abstinence base, but really addressing the harm, like reducing the harm. So we are a big harm reduction state. At one time we was, pushing everything, recovery, but, for Baltimore City, I would say we really have to look at it from a different lens. And I think approaching it in a space of reducing the harm first, and that's even for young people, people of color, our entire communities, how we engage and navigate them to the road to recovery, it will be key. The end game is recovery, but we just have to look at it a little bit different, especially for Black and Indigenous and people of color.
Okay. Good. That's very informative, and I think that's very well said. In short. So I also kind of wanted to ask, I guess, like Seth and Joe, being out in the West and arguably one of the more liberal parts of the area, does that play a factor into kind of like the progression and the progressiveness, and I guess kind of like how recovery is seen and perceived from like a stigma standpoint?
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Go ahead, Joe.
Well, I mean,
y'all are right above Oregon, who just passed one of the most lucrative laws in the modern era.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I just sat in on a press conference today about a similar bill that Washington's trying to take a run at, similar to Oregon. And, I mean, Seattle itself, I believe pioneered the LEAD program, law enforcement assisted diversion. It's something that came out, out of here about 2013. And, there's been a big look at decriminalization in the sense of what I see happening in the community. Like if you come around down by Superior Courthouse and the areas I was running around, I discussed in the book, it was like, it's been hands-off approach out there, which in some sense I feel like is, contrastingly oppressive in the sense of trying to arrest your way out if you don't avail anything. And, like we get labeled as progressive and these things, but if you've been paying attention to the news around the summer, LEAD is changing its name here in this community because they don't want to be associated with Seattle PD. I mean, I won't get into the nuts and bolts of that, but if you're paying close attention outside of mainstream media, I think a lot of people are trying to break ties with that, but it's hard because that group plays a role in this idea of decriminalization. But I feel like it's already kind of been happening in an oppressive sense in the community, and now it's trying to. I feel like this is just kind of my personal take on it is, trying to formalize it with a bill, and I feel like you looked around in King County, you got 13,000 people living out of doors, and I can tell from my experience, it's difficult not to use substances living out of doors at night for a variety of reasons. I think many people know. But when we get to the point that we're realizing we can't throw blanket fixes at people, we have gentrification, we have massive racial disparities in the city of Seattle, in King County. People are getting pushed out of the central area of the city, and that's where most of the resources are. We're looking at layers and layers of things that need to be addressed for Black, Indigenous, people of color, we're looking at classism, racism. It's difficult. There's a lot happening with it. And, right now, as I feel like people are extremely susceptible just because it's COVID, in a sense, I feel like has kind of been this equalizer, not to, it's not going over the boundaries of race and class and that kind of thing, but it's got a lot of people jammed up for a variety of reasons, socioeconomically, mental health issues, increased substance use, increased domestic violence, and have people needing to find more relief. And with trying to find more relief when it ends up in substances, we need more treatment, and so we talk about things like prevention, like T was talking about, what does that look like for a progressive place like Seattle, with the rising cost of rent is displacing the people that represent Seattle, what does prevention look like for that? Is addressing the root causes and conditions associated with people finding relief in substances. And so, I mean, we're in that decrim ballpark a little bit, I feel like. I think things have been labeled harm reduction in our community. But again, in that keeping people out of doors, is it really reducing harm? Like exposing people to a continued cycle of trauma because we're fighting over how to give people affordable housing or low income housing. I mean, these are the things that we're up against. And, this city is changing if you watch it. And I've only been here 12 years. And I mean, I can see that glaringly, as a cis hetero white man looking around being like, yeah, this ain't okay by any means. There's a lot happening here. Hope that kind of answers it. There's a lot of layers to what's happening in Seattle, I feel like, though, for sure. And
yeah,
anyway,
I can imagine, and y'all are kind of like in the eye of it right now. Anything else to add there, Seth?
I mean, I love what T was talking about and what Joe had mentioned. I mean, when T was speaking, I was just thinking of to me, what she was talking about is the necessity of being realistic about meeting people where they are and providing, I think without losing, harm reduction efforts and whatever, and that can look a lot of different ways. It shouldn't be, no one, no one should have a monopoly on what the term harm reduction actually refers to, because we are all working very much so in the reduction of harm. And in addition to that, one of the people who started our recovery high school, Jim Vollendroff, he frequently has been saying, he just reminds us all so many times that abstinence-based recovery is also alive and well. And it's succeeding at levels that we're not often able to support with empirical data because we're anonymous. We operate in these different communities, and sometimes that works. That's very helpful in some ways, and not so helpful in other ways when you're talking about trying to really capture how the efficacy of how well something is working. And no one's ever come to me and asked me, I'm not a part of any surveys, right? And I don't know, 1,000 people that I know aren't either, right? So I think that we could do a little better in terms of figuring out, hearing from our community leaders, what is that? Is this working? Is it not? What are you seeing? And that's the thing that I would say about the decriminalization. Like, I wasn't even offered the option to do drug court. I don't know if that was because I was drinking, all my stuff was drinking, or what the deal was, or maybe because of I had a felony charge. So I don't know what happened there. It wasn't an option for me. But I think that just looking at what are some other options that we can realistically offer, like right now, for instance, we look, absence-based recovery school. Initially, what we had, I'm on the board of recovery schools, the national board. So if you're looking for the Association of Recovery Schools, that's a great resource, right? And a lot of my mentors are on this board, right? And a lot of these schools started out as like requirements of 30 days sober. You got to have that. You got to, clean P test and all this stuff. And then you start unpacking some of that, and you're like, well, that's real easy to accomplish if you just came out of a 6 or 12-month treatment center that was private pay, and guess who's going to that, right? It's not the BIPOC populations that T was talking about, So that's that. When you really unpack that, you start realizing that's a racist policy. So we had to change that entire policy, and we're still not even close to being there to doing enough. But we are starting to provide We just started. Seattle's just began its first alternative peer group which that's another thing that is supports many of the longstanding recovery schools throughout the country. And that is the piece. It's essentially, it's like the McShin Foundation. It's a peer-led boys and girls club, essentially, for kids in recovery. So what are they going to do with those other, however many, until midnight, once they get out of school at 3, where they're going to do a bunch of activities. They're going to do, music, sports, certainly meetings, but we have surpassed the place where accepting that I've hugely benefited from the 12-step community. That is not necessarily enough for teenagers. Okay, one more meeting, you know what I mean? Like that, that can get, especially when you come to online, you're like, tap into another, really? That's what you're coming with? They're like, come on now, so their attention span's that's not too realistic. So we got to get more creative and innovative. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. I was just about to say that more creative. I mean, I have the fortune of like doing the group schedule here for the groups that we do from like 8:30 to 5. And even, I can try to put in as many groups as possible, but I've had to put in stuff like, as simple as let's go on a walk. I know y'all are sitting in a room all day and listening to kind of like the same stuff. Let's do yoga. I'll have them do, if they want to, a Zoom yoga instructor, like 2 Fridays out of the month. And you'd be surprised how many dudes are actually like, okay, I can get into this sort of thing just because it's a little different. We're in a situation where we're becoming a little more open-minded, which I think is awesome. So T, Kelly actually had a really good question here. I don't know if Todd can bring it up. She asked, how does harm reduction programs such as needle exchange help lead to recovery?
Oh, so if we are actually in the process right now for advocacy for OPS sites in Baltimore City. Can you raise the question up again so I can review it? Thank you. Oh, so if we were to, and I'm going to claim it, that we will be successful in gaining a OPS site. So we are able to do that if we had harm reduction sites for needle exchange programs to lead to recovery. The key of it is who's in the site, right? So if we have individuals who have lived experience of substance use and recovery, able to engage individuals who are actively using drugs, we can reduce the harm and support them and lead them in the process to recovery. I think it's multiple pathways in how we approach the recovery process. I think having peers everywhere, and I always said that, to include the future OPS sites is going to be a key in reducing harm, saving lives, and navigating people to recovery.
Cool. Yeah. What a concise answer. Very clear. And that also brings up, like, we talk about multiple pathways often, and a lot of people might not understand what that means, but like drug court is a pathway to recovery. These OPS harm reduction sites are pathways. High school is a pathway to recovery. I mean, all this stuff are just different ways to do it. I feel like we can kind of jam NA or AA 12-step programs in general down people's throats, and that makes them averse to it a lot of times. I think Seth also brought up a good point on the data. I'm very like evidence driven. I am a numbers guy, and that is what I think is a major problem with anonymity. It's great for personal recovery, but it doesn't exactly prove that this stuff works because we can't get any data on it. I'm happy to be a part of a foundation that takes data seriously and says we can take the recidivism rate and lower it if they come here. And that's what the evidence shows. Joe, is there any sort of like maybe data from how drug courts work that can, also say positive things like that? Because I know drug courts do a lot of data as well. I'm pretty sure.
Are you specifically asking about like drug courts interacting with the 12-step community and success on that engagement, or
just as a big picture in general? I'm just kind of curious, like, once T was mentioning some numbers, that stuff that it kind of, actually gives it like a concrete perspective to me sometimes, where it's like, wow, that's too many people to die in the last year or something like that. So I'm kind of wondering, statistically how like successful is it?
A drug court? How successful is it? So I think a lot of it has to do with, what's happening in the drug court. It's for one, like for the one that I work in, I believe we have right now between a 65 and 67% success rate. I don't like the word success with it because
Amazing.
You cannot complete, you can actually not complete drug court, but still be exposed to tools and resources, recovery community, RCOs. And I've seen it with people that went through the program that I was out in the streets with, people that graduated and still knew, hey, I know where to go for those things. Again, one of the things that, we're looking at, the historical component of the war on drugs. Why are people not engaging with treatment? What does it mean to be Black, Indigenous, and a person of color, and be brought into drug court and be like, why, and I can't speak for any person of color, but, why would I commit to this process? This system has continuously harmed me. And so we're looking at, how do we unpack that? How do we break down those barriers? I mean, and it's things like there are narratives inside of the community, whether it's outside of the jails or inside of the jail, saying, this is a setup. This is what's going to happen there. This is what's expected. I mean, we're looking at the 12-step community knows that the criminal legal system pawns people off on it. So what is the program I do, that I work with? What are we trying to do is say, you don't have to do 12-step. You can get credit for healthy social activities. I'm heavily focused on Buddhist and mindfulness-based recovery. I lead a mindfulness group on Mondays. We do recovery topic Tuesday and Friday. We have a grief and loss group. We're realizing like we have to get outside the framework of what is represented as the harmful arm of the criminal legal system and be looking at how are we reducing harm, and, we're primarily working with folks that are having impacts on other people in the community. Yes, we still have possession. Yes, we still have delivery charges, but we're really looking at folks where the substance use has progressed so far to the point that there needs to be a more robust type of support. And that's great with 12-step. It's great with these other, modalities. But sometimes that relationship, that interaction with the judge, that's when we talk about success rates in the court. We're talking about working with that population, high risk, high needs of reoffense, reincarceration, things like that. And so, getting back to just the basic of your question, is it ideal for somebody who's gets pulled over and gets, picked up with an empty baggie? Maybe not, probably not. Somebody that really needs that, that robust community support and a relationship with the judge where they're actually making eye contact and the prosecutor isn't looking to nail them every time they walk into the courtroom, and they feel supported, and there's contingency management and people being rewarded for showing up and those kind of things. That's the kind of court I work in. That's the kind of courts I would like to see more around the community. And I think with more of that, we change the nature of people's experience with this system. And maybe the outcomes would be higher, the successful outcomes. But again, it's just not measured by completion of the program. People get exposed to so many different pathways and supports along the way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and also being a person that loves stats, I know numbers can kind of be twisted and manipulated sometimes. So like, I think that's a very good point that you bring up, is exposure to outward like resources and recovery outcomes is kind of language that I've heard in the last few months of what that is. What are recovery outcomes? Kind of like all these different factors that play into what recovery looks like. Seth, in this high school, do you have like, well, first off, how long has the high school been operational?
We're going on about 5.5 years.
That's awesome. So have y'all been collecting data along this time to kind of show people that this is a viable option instead of just kind of like, it's clearly kind of past the pilot program stage. I feel like now y'all probably have some data that you can show to parents and show to kids and show to different courts and governments that this is another viable option instead of, say, juvenile corrections or something like that.
Yeah, we do have some. The first thing I want to make sure to mention is that for anybody that is looking for much more longitudinal, comprehensive data on recovery high schools. You want to look at the Association of Recovery Schools, and particularly look for a name, Andy Finch. Andrew Finch is probably the leading most statistician and author regarding all things recovery schools. He's on the board as well, and so he really has compiled a lot around the efficacy of recovery high schools. What we have found in a smaller collection, right? Because even these schools, they're quite small, right? At least, I mean, our school even right now is about 30 students total, right now, and there's the hope, of course, is to grow way beyond that. And before I even forget, what we are also seeing is that in the same frame of what T was talking about, it's not realistic for a lot. Not every teenager's dream is to be totally abstinent for their high school career. Whether they have drug problems or not. That's just not what they're not quite there yet. And some of them may not even need to get there, right? And so we're trying to build up other alternative school options and other programs, such as the alternative peer group or whatnot, that can be a middle ground a little bit, that they don't have to be this full, it's either you're all the way in or you're out, because a recovery high school versus a traditional high school is a very stark contrast, right? But what we have found in a study that we did around about 50 students is that, and this is rough data, so you're not going to find this abstract and all that's yet to be produced, but we recently have done a couple studies, and what we found is that students that participated in our program for beyond a full school year, so beyond 9 months essentially, were able to, the first thing they did was they increased their attendance from about one day a week to close to 4 days a week. So it's not 5, but it's a huge increase, right? Double or triple their attendance. We noticed that students that had they were able to increase their grades got significantly better, but what they did with their credits was they were able to in the span of a year, they were able to double their total amount of high school credits that they had. And clearly, to be completely transparent, we had some students coming in with 2 credits as a junior, 3 and 5 credit, right? But we have the infrastructure is such that we're supported by this interagency is the high school infrastructure in Seattle that supports like 10 different alternative school campuses for kids that are quite far behind on credits, and they offer smaller class sizes and more culturally competent education. I will say that, right? And we saw a cumulative grade point averages rise between 4 and 5 points on average. So no real shocker that once a kid comes in, gets sober, eliminates drugs from their life and maintains it, and so they have maybe get through a period of post-acute withdrawal where they might see little spikes, certainly in behaviors and mental health, right? That's certainly our population's majority co-occurring, surely. Their lives get significantly better, and all of a sudden school it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to, if you're a high schooler that's sober, to why wouldn't I be going to school, especially if I'm going to be going to school with other sober kids. It's just like it clicks. So I've seen some very significant, I've never in the entire rest of my career, I've never seen this level of productivity from the youth population in terms of sobriety and what it yields in their daily functioning.
Sure.
That's really cool. That's impactful stuff. T, before we wrap up, I did want to ask you, I did see that like education has been a major part of kind of like your journey. Has that played a factor into your recovery journey? Has your recovery played a factor into your like educational history?
I think it's a combination of the two, and it's 2 different levels for me for education. I think it's book education and then community recovery education, right? And what I have learned from just being a family member of someone that's impacted by substance use and addiction and recovery, right? So for me, I think it's just about learning as much as possible, and that's ever changing, about the disease of addiction and the navigation to recovery, and then trying to educate others about the fact that recovery is possible, and I think that's my biggest kick right now. It's funny that we are sticking on and talking about young people, but I also want to include faith-based organizations, neighborhood associations, building a community-based level around education about addiction, about even substances, right? We all believe that because we are working in the realm of recovery, that everybody understands different substances, they understand addiction, and they understand the pathway to recovery, but that's not true. Even down to our local legislators, like, you really are in a teaching mode every time you enter a room, right? Your mindset as a peer recovery specialist is to go in and give them something before you walk away. And it's our hope through the Maryland Peer Advisory Council, through Impact, and through this advocacy and leadership program, that we're able to educate as many people as possible. I would also love to introduce some peer recovery trainings to the younger population, and to know that they can go back into their communities, actually in their high schools, if when the future Lotus Preparatory School comes together, that they're able to work and be in a place where they can support individuals in recovery, and whatever that looks like for them, right? Not to us, because reduced recovery may look like a large lens for them, something they can never, and I'm talking about young people, that they may feel like they can never achieve, but making small steps is the key, and then wrapping education around that for young people and others who are seeking recovery is going to be the most important thing.
Absolutely. And one can actually argue that, there could be an advantage to being young. Our brains are still plastic. I feel like, we have a certain age range of a median of maybe about 30 to 35, maybe here at McShin. And I feel like, at a certain age, people are set in their ways. It's a lot, I think, harder to unchange things in general. That's not to disparage or be ageist or anything like that. That's just from what I found with communicating with people. And that's not also to say that I had a, 68-year-old friend of mine that just recently got his first year clean. So it was beautiful to see. And he was like, yeah, even us old farts can recover. And I was like, I love you, man. It's just so beautiful to see this disease doesn't care about your age, race, creed, tax bracket, or whatever. So recovery shouldn't either. Is kind of how I see it. I think it's really cool. Before we wrap up, I just kind of wanted to throw out kind of this question that Debbie Rosenbaum had. How blessed we are today to have so many pathways for recovery for students and people who are seeking recovery. Y'all have any advice on what can we do to keep this hopeful momentum going?
Never stop talking. Never stop advocating about recovery. We have to keep recovery in the forefront. We have to continue to be a voice for the voiceless. We have to continue to try to educate and build relationships with individuals who don't understand the disease of recovery, to include family members, which we didn't really discuss heavily on this call tonight. But we really have to continue the message that recovery is truly possible.
Yeah, I love it. I would say is it's like the critical thinking and listening piece. If you when I was talking about recovery schools, T immediately jumped in. It was like, we need to get one of those here, right? And that would be my message for young people. It's not just this novelty idea of a recovery high school. Well, we should, that'd be great. It is an injustice to children to not have one in every single district. How would that be? Right. What are kids supposed to do after they come? Residential treatment gets a bad rap, and it's not even about that. It's what T said. It probably depends on who's running it, right? But there's great programs. The problem is who's coming back. What are they coming back to? What's the continuum of care? What's the coordination of care after they come back? Are they going back to the same school that they left from? Because that's about the worst possible thing you can do. If you go right back to the same exact environment, I think finding back to her point that was mentioned earlier tonight, and it was reiterated, that piece of where's the merger between treatment and prevention? Where of a similar thread, where's the merger between the ability to embrace harm reduction with abstinence-based recovery? Can we not do these need to live in these separate worlds, but can we talk about it in a realistic way without losing the sight that, of course, what T also said was what's the main goal? Eventually, we want to not be doing drugs, right? Of course, we want that to be the case. It's just that path and that journey can look different. And I think that, and always I think being a abstinence advocate, having seen people do it, I've watched these young people literally put recovery on the map for teenagers in Seattle, because now you see them in meetings and you see them in the community. It's not weird to see a teenager. People don't wonder anymore, oh, where's that kid's parent? They're there by themselves. They came by themselves, and they came in a herd, and that's the thing that keeps them safe. So I think looking at it from that lens of how can we come together, because I just never want people to be sold short on what is possible. If I had got a different message, I might not be sober. I might not have thought it was realistic that I would be really all the way sober. I know my family didn't think that was a realistic goal. They thought I needed to not drive, and that would solve. You know what I mean? It's like keep me out of trouble, right? But so anyways, I think just collaborating more together. That's it.
Yeah, reducing that stigma and harm for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think the thing that stands out for me is just based on some experiences I've had is, really emphasizing. I had so many people over the years tell me things like, "Oh, I'm glad you could help yourself," and that you were able to, to get yourself out of that pit, and really letting folks know that it's a community effort. Like, it's not an individual show; it's a community effort. And the last part about that is that, like T said too, is you have people that don't understand substance uses, or they don't understand recovery, and there's people that it's difficult to have those conversations with. We hear about tolerance and compassion for people who use drugs, but it's also tolerance and compassion and patience and kindness for those folks that don't understand this side of it. And we still need their support. We still need them to support legislation and bills change and things like that. And I think that's some of the hardest work I've experienced, is how do you engage those folks and bring them to the table, and with the patience and the wherewithal to either change their mind. And if we can't do that, just present the facts, and that's just the basis of it. Is this is a community effort. We need the community behind this, and as it's specific to each locale, each region.
Yeah, we're definitely at a place where we have to change. In order to save lives, we have to change policy for Maryland. And I'm just speaking, and I'm sure that's probably the same across the country, but that is the only way, getting those people who really have a desire for change at the table. And that's how we save lives, is when we implement and we advocate to change different policies.
Yeah, that's what we've said on here. Absolutely. It starts local a lot of times, more often than not, for sure. Any other final remarks, T?
No, I want to thank you for the opportunity for allowing us to come on and speak about recovery. I'm always excited to do that. I'm excited, and it's refreshing to hear about young people. Love to have that dialogue and conversation, because it's too many times that young people are just cut out of the conversation in reference to recovery. So that definitely gave me a little heart sign to bring that in for tonight. Great voices, and I appreciate each and every one of you. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. Any closing remarks, Seth?
I'm so glad that to be on here. I read about T's accomplishments, and there's plenty, right? And I've known Joe since he got sober, and he's been on the fast track for quite some time. I did want to just show, he won't do it probably, but this is his book right here, Causes and Conditions. He's too humble. There you go. So anyways, but I would just reiterate, I'm just so glad what he just said about community. I do not think that you can possibly put enough emphasis on, like, in my experience between treatment And between these recovery high schools, collegiate recovery communities, everything
Yes.
that read about that McShin is doing, the foundation is all peer to peer. I'm seeing, case study after case study of a kid coming in. First thing that happens, they got to see somebody that if recovery is cool, boom, it's on the map for them. Without that, you may forget about it. You're coming with that corny, square nonsense. Nope, you're not. Miss me with all that's what they say. And if as soon as they can come in, find some sober friends, they can find a mentor, and before you know it, they are mentoring others, and all of a sudden, that they've internalized this, as part of their identity, and then it becomes their primary social group. So I just can't imagine that. We do have plenty of kids in the 12-step groups, but I will surely tell you that from objectively, what I'm seeing is that it is 90% about community, 90% at least, just amazing. And that's certainly been my experience as well. So the last thing I would say is if we can get more equitable access to treatment. That's the missing link. There's a small window, and this is not just with young people, right? There's this window of opportunity. I have a kid this week and a young adult last week where somebody is willing to go to treatment. But if there's barriers in the way, by Valentine's Day, they're not going. That window closed.
That's right.
And I thought that anything that we can do, if we really want to look at decriminalizing and changing legislation, that is the diversion directly into treatment if they want it, right? Not saying that's for everybody, right? But that just needs the barriers to be eliminated. I think we will double our success rate, and then like you said, Alex, we got to capture it. Got to figure out how to capture the success that's actually taking place.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Any other closing thoughts there, Joe?
I don't think I have anything. Just really a pleasure to be here. T, thank you for everything you said tonight. Really grateful to be in this space with you. Seth, my brother, thank you for your support along this journey. You've contributed so much to it, and just want to thank Alex and Todd for, making this happen for us tonight to share with some other folks in the larger recovery community, which is highly virtual right now. So hope some folks got to join in. Appreciate y'all.
Absolutely. Well, kind of as Seth said, so I hope these three wonderful people made recovery look cool. I think for me, they definitely did. Absolutely. Make me very proud and happy to be in recovery. I thank y'all very much for coming on. It was very informative, very educational, very vital. The work y'all do is really just amazing. T, Joe, Seth, I really appreciate it. Big shout out to our producer, Todd, and all those listening and watching. If you need help, reach out. This has been Get in the Herd After Hours. Peace out, y'all. Much love.
My name is Shannon Lance. I'm currently here in recovery at McShin Foundation. I got out of jail on January 10th, 2021. And while I was incarcerated there, my mother passed away due to COVID complications on December 14th. It was a really challenging event in my life. While I was incarcerated there, I watched the recovery videos and the podcast on the tablets there, that was made by the McShin Foundation. Getting the Herd podcast really made me feel like I was a part of something on the outside, because, there's people that are commenting and just seeing, people that I was incarcerated with on the videos, and just thinking, man, that's going to be me, before too long. And, I'm going to be sitting there in them rooms and, be able to be a part of the podcast and Get in the Herd series. And, now I'm a part of the Herd here at McShin, and it's an amazing feeling. And it's nice having a fulfilled sense of hope in my life currently, and just to live one day at a time, and just to have positive feelings in my life and good relationships with my family and friends is an amazing event.
life. The fire inside. The fever is breaking. The shadows are fading away as I sharpen the knife. Can't take me out. No, I ain't going down tonight. Not over yet. Ain't gonna quit. No matter what. Never lay down, never give up. I am a fighter. I'm a fighter. I'm a survivor. Even if I fall, I'll be up again, 'cause I'm a fighter. I am a fighter. I'm a survivor. Never lay down, never give up. I am a fighter. Under attack, skies going black, sirens are sounding, I'm screaming, I'm shouting, I'm breaking the silence at last. This is my life, and I'm coming to take it back. Coming to take it back. Not over yet. Ain't gonna quit. No matter what. Never lay down, never give up. I am a fighter. I'm a fighter. I'm a survivor. Even if I fall, I'll be up again, 'cause I'm a fighter.